The power of quiet confidence is not about shyness, retreat, or invisibility. It is an unshakable strength that requires no announcement. In a world that praises loud ambition, constant broadcasting, and the need to prove one's value, silence becomes a rare form of power. Quiet confidence is the understanding that your worth is not dependent on noise, attention, or recognition. It is the steady belief that you can move through the world with purpose without the need to justify your existence to anyone. When you carry yourself with grounded assurance, people feel it even if you never raise your voice. Silence, then, becomes not a void but a presence. Quiet confidence is formed in moments when you choose not to respond in haste, not to defend your worth, and not to argue for your importance. It is when you realize that your identity is not built through debate, but through self-awareness. External judgment loses its weight because you are no longer defined by comparison, competition, or approval. You know what you bring, even if others overlook it. You know who you are, even if no one is watching. The loudest voices often speak from insecurity, but quiet confidence emerges from internal certainty. There is strength in watching rather than reacting, listening rather than interrupting, and observing rather than forcing your presence. Silence gives you the ability to understand what others miss. It sharpens perception, deepens insight, and reveals truth. People speak to prove themselves. Those with quiet confidence speak only when it matters. Their voice is not frequent, but it is felt. Their presence is not demanding, but it is undeniable. They do not chase rooms or conversations to be seen. They enter with calm assurance and let the room recognize them on its own time. Quiet confidence teaches patience, discipline, and emotional clarity. It allows you to step back from the urgency of being acknowledged and embrace the slower but more authentic process of self-recognition. You learn to build worth internally rather than collecting it from external praise. Silence becomes the space where growth happens, where reflection shapes identity and direction. You understand that you do not need to rush your arrival, nor compete to be noticed. You can be powerful without performance, influential without volume, respected without spectacle. The power of quiet confidence is not passive, it is intentional. It is the refusal to let noise dictate your path. You rise without shouting, succeed without boasting, and endure without explaining. The world may overlook you at first, but quiet confidence does not need instant applause. It understands timing, patience, and resilience. Eventually, consistency becomes undeniable, integrity becomes recognizable, and silence becomes the proof of inner strength. When you carry quiet confidence, you are not trying to become more than you are. You are simply returning to the truth of who you have always been. When the world underestimates you, something profound awakens inside you. It is not anger, not bitterness, and not desperation for validation, but a quiet ignition of purpose. Being overlooked has a way of revealing who you are to yourself. It strips away comfort, expectation, and assurance. It places you in a space where you cannot rely on applause, support, or recognition, and in that space you learn to trust your own voice. When others dismiss your potential or fail to see your worth, you are given an unexpected gift, the freedom to grow without the weight of their expectations. You no longer perform for approval, you rise from authenticity. Underestimation can feel like rejection, but it is often redirection. It pushes you inward, where truth is not measured by the opinion of others, but by your commitment to becoming better than you were yesterday. When the world counts you out, you are no longer bound by its timeline or its definition of success. You find room to evolve at your own pace without the noise of comparison. You learn to build quietly, to progress steadily, and to let your transformation answer the doubt that once surrounded you. There is a power that forms in this silence, the power to become undeniable. Those who are underestimated develop a different kind of resilience. They do not break under disregard, they sharpen. They do not collapse under doubt, they deepen. They are not driven by the need to prove others wrong, but by the desire to reveal their truth in their own time. When the world assumes your limits, you are challenged to surpass them, not out of ego, but out of conviction. You learn to work not for applause, but for alignment. Your goals stop depending on who believes in you, and start depending on who you are committed to becoming. Underestimation removes the illusion of easy paths. You stop expecting fairness, predictability, or immediate recognition. You learn to show up even when no one notices, to continue even when no one encourages, and to persist even when no one claps. That endurance becomes your edge. While others rely on external fuel, you learn to generate your own. The world may not see your discipline, your effort, or your growth, but you feel it strengthening you every day. You begin to realize that obscurity is not failure, it is foundation. When you are underestimated, your story does not weaken. It becomes more compelling. You are not defined by who overlooks you, but by who you choose to become despite it. Every moment of dismissal becomes a thread in the narrative of your rise. You are not rushing to be seen, not begging to be acknowledged, and not chasing approval. You are simply preparing, evolving, and building a life that will speak for itself. Underestimation is not your ending. It is the silent beginning of a version of you that will no longer need the world to recognize your worth to know that it exists. Silence as a strategy is not the absence of voice, but the mastery of it. It is the deliberate choice to understand before responding, to observe before reacting, and to position yourself with intention rather than impulse. When silence is misunderstood as weakness, you learn to let perception do what it will while you remain anchored in clarity. You do not need to announce every step, argue every point, or correct every misconception. Instead, you choose to speak when your words carry weight rather than noise. That restraint becomes your advantage. It protects your energy, your direction, and your vision from being diluted by distractions that seek to pull you into battles you no longer need to fight. Silence as strategy teaches you that not every accusation deserves defense, and not every doubt requires explanation. You begin to understand that your time, attention, and emotional capacity hold value, and not everyone has earned access to them. By speaking less, you listen more. By reacting less, you perceive more. You see the intentions behind words, the insecurity behind volume, and the fear behind aggression. You learn that those who dominate conversations are not always the ones who understand them, and those who speak the least often absorb the most. Silence becomes your arena of insight, where you sharpen your judgment and refine your direction without interference. There is also power in withholding information, not out of secrecy, but out of wisdom. You recognize that goals are fragile in their early stages, vulnerable to external influence, criticism, and pressure. Silence becomes the shield that allows growth to happen privately. You no longer feel compelled to update the world on your progress or justify your choices. You let transformation occur in spaces without witnesses, so that when you finally step forward, you do not arrive asking for approval, but embodying certainty. That calm unveiling becomes immeasurable strength, because nothing is more intimidating than someone who moves without needing validation. When silence becomes strategy, you understand timing. You know when to speak, when to wait, and when to walk away. You realize that responses delivered from emotion rarely hold the same power as those delivered from clarity. You begin to detach from the need to win arguments because you are focused on winning outcomes. Noise seeks reaction. Silence chooses alignment. Arguments seek victory. Strategy seeks peace. This is not retreat, but control, the ability to decide where your voice goes, who it serves, and what it builds. In choosing silence with intention, you reclaim authorship of your own narrative. You are no longer pulled by provocation or pressured by expectation. You know that the loudest moment of your journey will not be your defense, but your evolution. Silence is not surrender. It is the preparation of strength, the preservation of dignity, and the quiet construction of a life that will eventually speak for itself. When silence is chosen, not forced, it becomes the most articulate form of power. Rewriting your worth without validation begins with a profound shift, choosing to see yourself not through the world's lens, but through your own. It requires unlearning the habit of measuring value by applause, acceptance, or external confirmation. When you stop waiting for someone to recognize your potential before you allow yourself to grow, you reclaim the authority over your identity. Worth is not granted, it is realized. It is not borrowed from praise, nor lost in silence. It exists independent of acknowledgement, and learning to stand in that truth is one of the most liberating transformations a person can experience. Validation becomes a quiet addiction when you believe that your worth needs proof. Every compliment becomes a temporary high, every dismissal a personal wound. But when you begin to rewrite your worth internally, you no longer need permission to exist fully. You no longer perform to be seen, nor shrink to be accepted. You stop chasing approval as if it were oxygen and begin to breathe from a deeper place. In that shift, you start to understand that worthiness is not something you earn through achievement, presentation, or perfection. It is something that belongs to you because you are here and you are becoming. The journey inward is not always easy. It means confronting the parts of yourself that doubted your voice, that feared invisibility, that depended on applause to feel significant. But growth requires honesty, and honesty asks you to release narratives that never belonged to you. The world teaches competition before self, connection, comparison before self, understanding, noise before inner clarity. When you detach from those patterns, you begin to see that external validation was never the foundation you needed. It was only the illusion you were taught to chase. Rewriting your worth means allowing yourself to be whole without witnesses. It means building character when no one is watching, cultivating discipline without reward, and honoring your dreams even when no one else sees their shape. It is choosing to continue without being clapped for, choosing to evolve without being encouraged, and choosing to believe in yourself without being confirmed by the crowd. This is not isolation but identity. It is the quiet strengthening of self that happens when you no longer wait for the world to mirror what you already know internally. When you no longer rely on validation, your presence changes. You move through spaces without the hunger to be noticed or the fear of being overlooked. You no longer bend yourself to fit expectations or silence your truth to avoid disapproval. You express rather than impress. You exist rather than perform. You choose alignment over acceptance and authenticity over applause. In doing so, you discover that recognition is most powerful when it is not needed to define you. Rewriting your worth is not about rejecting others, but about remembering yourself. It is the realization that the value you carry does not dim when unseen and does not grow when praised. It simply is. When you anchor your identity in that truth, you become untouchable, not because you are beyond feeling, but because you finally understand that your worth was never meant to be held in someone else's hands. Becoming unshakable in stillness begins with learning to be alone with your own mind without fear, distraction, or the need to escape. In a world that moves at a relentless pace, where attention is currency, noise is constant, and urgency is celebrated, stillness becomes a radical act of self-ownership. It is the intentional slowing of thought, the quiet grounding of identity, and the steady return to who you are beneath everything the world expects you to be. When you allow yourself to sit in that inner quiet, you begin to hear the truth that gets lost beneath comparison, pressure, and performance. Stillness is not emptiness, it is clarity. There is a kind of power that only forms in silence, a depth that cannot be reached through noise or validation. When you stop running from your own thoughts, you begin to understand the patterns that have shaped you. The fears you carried, the expectations you absorbed, the narratives you accepted without questioning. In stillness, you are no longer performing for the world or negotiating your worth through attention. You are simply present with yourself, and presence becomes the teacher. It reveals what genuinely matters and what was only noise disguised as importance. It shows you where you were chasing recognition instead of meaning, motion instead of purpose. Stillness builds resilience not because it shields you from challenge, but because it strengthens your center. When you are unshakable in your internal world, external circumstances lose their power to define you. Criticism loses its sting, silence loses its threat, and uncertainty loses its ability to unravel you. You are no longer controlled by the unpredictable patterns of approval, rejection, success, or failure. Instead, you stand in quiet alignment with your own truth. You know who you are, even when no one is clapping, even when nothing is certain, even when life feels paused. That inner steadiness becomes your foundation. Becoming unshakable in stillness also means releasing the belief that movement is the same as progress. Constant activity can disguise avoidance. Non-stop effort can mask insecurity. True growth sometimes happens in the moments when life appears still from the outside, but is transforming deeply on the inside. Stillness allows the heart to recalibrate, the mind to clear, and the soul to regain direction without interference. You learn to trust timing rather than force outcomes, to surrender control without losing intention, and to allow life to unfold without demanding immediate answers. This quiet strength does not make you detached from the world, but more grounded within it. You engage without losing yourself, strive without desperation, and hope without fear. Stillness is not withdrawal from life. It is preparation for it. It teaches you to move from clarity rather than confusion, purpose rather than panic. When you become unshakable in stillness, you no longer need the world to slow down for you to find peace. You carry it within you. That inner equilibrium becomes your anchor, your compass, and your quiet proof that true power is not found in controlling the noise of the world, but in mastering the calm that exists beneath it.